Thank you all for coming today. As part of Mental Health Awareness Month, this month, we are putting our spotlight, our HR Monthly Minute spotlight on mental health awareness. And we are fortunate enough to have Justin here with us today, who is willing to share his mental health journey with us. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to him.
Sounds good. Good afternoon. My name is Justin Rathbone. I'm 21 years old. I'm a cloud engineer here at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska. I want to thank Blue Cross for inviting me here today to speak during Mental Health Awareness Month. Today my speech is going to be both related to mental health and also just kind of overcoming struggle. Before I begin, I'd like to also say that my speech isn't medical advice. I'm going to speak to what has kind of worked for me specifically. My story begins about 4 years ago when I left my small hometown of Waverly, Nebraska for college here at UNO. The first semester of college as a computer science student was everything I had hoped for. As someone who is extroverted in a major that is normally dominated by introverts, it was easy for me to make friends and connect with new people. I had struggled with depression and anxiety before entering college, but my busy schedule and medication made those struggles an afterthought. During my first semester of college, I worked 20 hours a week while taking 15 credit hours and reffing soccer games on the weekends. I was, of course, exhausted at times, but I loved it. After ending my first semester of college with a 4.0 and landing an internship here at Blue Cross, I was ready to keep going. About halfway into my second semester of college, COVID hit. I moved out of the dorms and into the cheapest 3-bedroom apartment my buddies and I could find. Like most people, I thought COVID would just be 15 days to slow the spread. I figured I would only have to do 1 or 2, maybe 3 semesters of online classes. After a semester of online classes, I couldn't help but notice people around me started going back to their normal lives, and mine was still taking place within the 13 by 11 foot room that I worked from home and studied from. I spent 95% of my life in my room, and I would look at the computer science courses in confusion, wondering why they were still online. Not only did I not have a reason to get dressed in the morning, but I would wake up and see on Instagram or Snapchat that people my age were going back to their normal lives, their normal college experiences, socializing with friends, while mine was still taking place within the 4 walls of my 13 by 11 foot room. I'm someone who sets ambitious goals for myself, and when I didn't have a reason to get dressed in the morning, life began to feel meaningless, and I truly believed that I was a loser. This prolonged isolation created an incredible amount of anxiety within myself. Anxiety became such a big and normal part of my life for so long that I began to not know any different. For example, if I texted someone, like my mom or my sister, and I didn't get a response back as soon as I expected, I would automatically assume that they died in some car accident. And I'd actually believe this to be true. And when you see life through this kind of lens of fear, it infringes on nearly every aspect of your day-to-day life. My ambition and youthful sense of adventure slowly began being replaced with stubbornness, and anxiety was changing who I was becoming. In April of last year, I reached a breaking point. My anxiety was never a social anxiety, but an anxiety of some impending doom that might happen. In April of last year, that fear came true. In the span of 10 days, my dad had a stroke next to his brainstem that he barely managed to survive. My relationship ended unexpectedly, and another significant life event happened that was just as impactful to me. My anxiety was defined by fear of some impending doom, which did not happen once but 3 times in a short time frame. At this point, I had already lost most of my normal college experience with only a semester left. And 5 months before this, my grandma had passed away. The weeks that followed, and between graduating high school and this point a year ago, I had moved 5 times. The weeks that followed these 3 events, which were exactly a year ago, were some of the worst of my entire life. I couldn't sleep, as my anxiety was the worst it had been in my entire life. I had to cope with all of this while studying and taking finals, which happened to be all of my senior level computer science courses. I pushed through, and after my spring semester ended a year ago, I was angry, anxious, depressed, and bitter. For about a week, I laid around in self-pity, and that of course got me nowhere. We all get dealt cards in life. Some of us get better cards than others, and while it is easy to get hung up on our cards and feel like we got screwed over, the real game lies in the choices we make with those cards, the risks we decide to take, and the consequences we choose to live with. If I wanted to improve my cards and my life, I needed to improve myself. A better mind and a better life were not going to fall into my lap. If I wanted it, I had to go get it myself. This realization was a major turning point in my life. To me, improving myself meant confronting the anxieties I had developed during COVID. At the beginning of summer, I created a vision of the life I wanted to create and the person I wanted to become independent of my anxiety, and developed a plan to turn this vision into a reality. During high school, my passion was video editing, and I'd been wanting to make YouTube videos for a long time, but had nothing to film. So I decided I was going to document the self-improvement journey in a YouTube video, and to put more pressure on myself, which I definitely needed at the time, I got a brand new laptop and told my friends and family that this is what I was going to do, so that there was no turning back. So this is the story of what I did last summer to change my life. Some of the fears I developed during the course of COVID were large crowds, loud noises, and any environment that felt uncertain to me. I rarely traveled, and I would make excuses to stay home. I thought to myself, where can I travel by myself in the United States so I would be surrounded by the things that I feared most? New York City felt like an obvious option. So last June, that's where I went. This trip was full of firsts for me. This was the first time booking a flight and a hotel, and the first time I would ever travel alone. I didn't want anybody to go with me because while I always had the support of my friends and family, anxiety at its core was a battle I needed to fight on my own. My family and friends had known I'd had a rough past few years and struggled with anxiety so much that I would go get groceries at 8 a.m. to avoid the crowds. So when I told them I was going to travel to New York by myself, they all thought, oh dear Lord, and rightfully so. When I got to New York, I of course felt anxious, and the first time riding in a taxi made me more appreciative of Omaha drivers. Going into this trip, I had a couple of destinations I wanted to see, but intentionally did not set a strict schedule. I allowed myself to be spontaneous and free for the first time in what felt like years. After a few hours of walking around, I wasn't thinking about some irrational events that may or may not happen. It felt like the lens of fear that was placed on my life for so long was slowly starting to fade, and this was easily the best vacation I've ever been on. One evening, I remember particularly well, I went to Times Square to see the lights and watch some street performers. They were doing flips and all sorts of stuff when the show suddenly stopped. They said they were going to grab random people from the audience to help with their next act. As if they knew I was on this trip to confront my anxiety, one of the performers points at me and says, I'm looking at you, come here right now. A nighttime walk suddenly turned into me standing in the middle of Times Square at the command of these performers. The other lucky volunteers and I had to dance in front of everyone one by one, and these dance moves were not exactly work appropriate. Which made me happy I did not bring family with me on the trip. But I embraced it and had a great rest of the trip. When I got back to Omaha, the streets didn't seem nearly as crowded, and I was ready to face more challenges. New York City was really only a fun getaway. I needed something that would consistently get me outside of my comfort zone. I had been reading about some of the benefits of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a while, and after some Googling, there happened to be a Jiu-Jitsu academy right across the street from where I lived, so I signed up. It turns out this was not exactly your average Jiu-Jitsu academy. The coach is the 2019 Jiu-Jitsu World Champion. There were about a dozen people who are black belts, which takes just about a decade to earn. And the owner of the gym was Warren Buffett's personal security guard for 20 years. The other people to my left and right were police officers, wrestlers, military personnel. Then there was Justin Rathbone, an overly nice computer science student who had never been in a fight in his life and probably would have been voted least likely to wrestle in high school. My first several experiences in jiu-jitsu went as you might expect, baptism by fire. I got beat up, knocked down, and my body folded into just about every possible angle you can imagine. You might be wondering, you've already been having a tough time with life for the past few years. Why are you now paying money to get beat up? The point wasn't to get beat up. The point was to fight, lose, and keep getting up. For 2.5 hours twice a week all summer, I had to get up again and again. This built up my mental fortitude to something that was better than it was prior to COVID. An important lesson Jiu-Jitsu taught me is that when you try to please everyone else, you often end up pleasing nobody, including yourself. Over the course of the summer, I got better and was able to start winning matches against people that were my age and not world champions, which lit a fire inside of me to keep improving myself. I was 13 years old and worked out in a gym for the first time. There was a list of 40 boys and girls sorted by their bench press max,
on the wall for everyone to see. Second to the bottom of this list was my name. I had to get out that 35-pound bar and walk by everybody with a shaking in my arms when I wanted to bench press. I had been working out for a while, but last summer I really focused on it more. Alongside jiu-jitsu, I've been working out 4 times a week and eating a lot of protein shakes and unseasoned chicken breast. In the past year, I gained almost 20 pounds of healthy weight and muscle, and my body is no longer a source of insecurity and confidence. If you struggle with your mental health, almost every mental health professional will recommend some sort of fitness, and I'm glad this is something that I've invested so much time into. When I had spare time over the summer, I began reading books about psychology and self-help. This was the most important part of my self-development journey alongside going to therapy regularly. From when I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety at 16, it felt like beating mental illness was playing chess against someone whose pieces you couldn't see. I just had to guess and hope that the moves I was making were the right ones, because I didn't understand myself. As I kept educating myself about psychology and going to therapy, the pieces on the chessboard of life became more visible. The more I learned, the more I was able to replace bad beliefs and habits with new ones. This started to remove the ceiling that anxiety and depression put on my life for so long, and I'm happy to say today that I'm no longer in therapy, and after being on medication for over 4 years, it's been over 18 months since I've been on any medication. Throughout last summer, I routinely went out of my way to plan fun events with my friends that I would normally not do, and I documented everything from my video. For years, I was in survival mode, which caused me to take myself too seriously, so I made a great effort to enjoy life more. The end of the video I made serves as a reminder to myself that no matter what adversity I face in life, how I respond is in my control. When the summer was over and the video was completed, my mom asked me if I had reached the vision of the life I wanted to create for myself and the person I wanted to become. I said then and would still say today, more than I could have imagined. Do not underestimate the power of vision and direction. These are irresistible forces able to conquer what seems to be unconquerable obstacles into traversable pathways and expanding opportunities. Once I was done editing the video, which I titled Fall Forward, My Struggle with Anxiety and How I Took Control of My Life, I uploaded it and shared it on my social media, and it's on my LinkedIn, if anybody would like to go watch it. When I uploaded the YouTube videos in high school, I get praise from teachers and students, but nothing on the level that I've received with this video. Family, friends, former teachers, principals, superintendents, and coworkers all commented on the video. The feedback I received was simply overwhelming, and knowing I had done exactly what I set out to do was one of the most gratifying feelings of my life. Despite my dad's stroke being so close to his brainstem, he made a full recovery. When I got to the hospital last April, I woke up to a text from my sister saying that he had had a stroke. I drove down to Lincoln, and as you can understand, I was nervous driving down there, not only because he had a stroke, but I drove down to the exact hospital, that exact hospital 5 months before that, when I got the text that my grandma was going to pass away. After walking into the room, I had no idea what his condition was. He looked at me and said, "What's going on, dude?" He then told me and my siblings that he was bored and wanted to go home. It wasn't until a neurologist showed us his MRI that we realized it was not only a miracle he was alive, but had no damage whatsoever. And in classic Bob Rathbone fashion, he had a stroke on a Thursday and went back to work on Monday. After uploading the video, I went back to school for my final semester of college, and on August 22nd of last year, I had my first in-person class in over 900 days. It was my last first day of school, and I can say it was the best first day of school of my life. I'm sure many students in my classes wondered why I seemed so happy to be there. And during my last semester of college, I made more friends than I had during the past several years. I was also invited to speak at Midland University at a conference for high schoolers and spoke to them about how they can find empowerment in their lives during difficult times. Several students messaged me privately, letting me know how my presentation had inspired them. I graduated a semester early with a 3.8 GPA and a degree in computer science. During each graduation ceremony, the university selects a graduating student to do a featured news story on. I was honored to be selected as the student by the university for the video I had made. The university made a video and news article about how I overcame my anxiety, and I was recognized by Chancellor Lee on social media. Soon after graduating, I began working here at Blue Cross as a cloud engineer, and the past several months of working here have been terrific. One of my inspirations growing up was Steve Jobs. He is the reason why I first began teaching myself how to code when I was in middle school, and a quote from him has always stuck with me through the years. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust the dots will somehow connect in your future. Believing that the dots will connect somewhere down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And this will make all the difference. Exactly a year ago was one of the lowest points in my life, and the dots were simply not connecting. And they had taken me well beyond the well-worn path. Things happened to me that I'd never asked for and didn't deserve, but that's life. And even during some of the darkest days of my life where it felt like I had lost everything, I had never lost the ability to choose my attitude given the circumstances of my life. My attitude was not me telling myself that everything was fine when it wasn't. I set the belief in myself that I was capable of becoming much more than I was, and this created a very different dynamic of behavior. In the book, The Laws of Human Nature, which is my personal favorite book, Robert Greene talks about the balance between thinking and emotions. The Greeks had a metaphor for this called the rider and the horse, which helped me understand that you cannot divorce emotions from thinking, but you can govern which one dominates. The horse is our emotional nature impelling us to move. This horse has tremendous energy and power, but without a rider, a horse cannot be guided. The rider is our thinking self. Through training and practice, it holds the reins and guides the horse, transforming this powerful animal energy into something productive. The one without the other is useless. The horse and the rider must work together. This means we consider our actions beforehand. We bring as much thinking as possible into a situation before we make a decision. I was invited to speak at Midland last fall by someone who knew me when I was in high school, when I had made YouTube videos. He asked me, Justin, how did you express yourself when you were 16, 17, and anxious or depressed? I think he thought I was going to say it through my YouTube videos, but my answer surprised him. And it was that I didn't express myself when I was anxious or depressed at 16, 17, or 18. I knew all along that depression and anxiety were impairments to my judgment, so I avoided using or posting social media or making any impulsive or big life decisions. I also believed that if I acted on my depression, I would be confirming these irrational beliefs about myself to be true and living as if they were true. Emotions are part of the equation of our lives, but not the entire equation. Just because something feels good doesn't mean it is good. Just because something feels bad doesn't mean it is bad. Emotions are merely signposts, suggestions that our neurobiology gives us, not commandments. Therefore, we shouldn't always trust our own emotions. In fact, I believe we should make a habit of questioning them. I'd like to end the speech with a quote from the philosopher Carl Jung that I think summarizes not just my speech, but the first 21 years of my life. That is, I am not what has happened to me. I am what I chose to become. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Justin, for sharing your
Of
story
course.
with us.